These war-waging responsibilities are as essential to the conduct of war as is fighting. In businesses, the cost of chronic underperformance is money, market share, and perhaps the job and reputation of the chief executive. In war, the cost is lives, whether those of the innocent or the citizens who become soldiers, and in some limited cases, the very existence of the political community. When waging war, dialogue and execution both matter. Welcome everyone. Today we'll be going over retired U.S. Army Lieutenant General James M. Dubik's book, Just War Reconsidered, Strategy, Ethics, and Theory. The value proposition for those inclined to business will find a few items in this book. Dubik focuses mainly on addressing senior political and military leaders and those in managerial positions that have the responsibility to lead and contribute to important war-waging dialogue. Similarly, for-profit and non-profit businesses, their owners, chief executives, and leaders charged with providing subject matter expertise or managerial oversight into the decision-making process of that business would find value in what Dubik has written. If you or your people are in charge of developing courses of action for your organization, then there are valuable commonalities between Dubik's war-waging responsibilities and your business plans. While reading or listening to Just War Reconsidered, you will find an emphasis on open, candid, and continuous dialogue amongst decision-makers heading into and through the execution of warfare. It looks at the moral imperatives of ensuring correct strategic aims, policies, and campaigns, and what it takes to make it all happen. The author provides numerous principles and friction points that are both logical and easily transcribable to the business sector. In warfare, there are no greater responsibilities than committing nations' warfighters into harm's way, while simultaneously putting at risk both non-combatants and the political community that made the commitment. Naturally, failure to effectively plan for a business endeavor or project are not as severe as failing to wage and conduct wartime campaigns. However, as far as businesses are concerned, it can be devastating. What scenario is worse for a company and its employees than not making a profit, going into bankruptcy, laying off workers, and dissolving the organization? As a result, we should take care in developing courses of action for our business to the same degree that our nation's leaders should take prior to committing our military to a conflict. Dubik, thankfully, takes us through those successes and failures so that we may glean his principles for our use. The content starts off with current discussions on just war theory that has a clear delineation between the strategic level of going to war, jus ad bellum, and the operational and tactical levels of its conduct, jus in bello, where the lead up to the decision to go to war and how to wage it are made among senior political and military leaders. Once the action is taken, it becomes the primary domain of the military, and at best, the politicians have symbolic control. This way is understandable, as the military is made up of professionals that dedicate their lives to perfecting their warfighting craft. But the author speaks up that it would be folly to believe that the politicians should simply stand back and await the results. This perspective comes from the relationship between the nation's political community and the military that carries out its will. One perspective comes from Samuel Huntington's objective control theory, and the other comes from Peter Fever's principal agent theory, of which Dubik lays out to the reader. In objective control theory, the relationship should be that of a political government that has an entirely autonomous and professional military sphere which adopts an apolitical approach. They focus on developing their ways and means of conducting warfare while maintaining distances from the machinations of the political world. In order to develop such high level of professionalism, politicians seek to avoid too much interference in how the senior military officers shape their services. In this way, the nation gets an armed force that is ready and equipped for a war that serves the primary principles of the nation, as opposed to the whims of any particular political party. In principal agent theory, the military is treated more like contracted employees or firms, whose duty is only to execute operations at the specific direction of politicians. The idea is that ultimately, the civilian government has control over how the military conducts itself, and therefore, senior military officers and the commanders of warfighting organizations simply do as they are told and only speak when asked. Much like a contracted project's statement of work, the military will execute to the letter, even if its leaders believe it is ultimate folly. They will win the battles, even if they know it won't win the wars. The politicians do, technically speaking, have the right to be wrong, as the author brings up time and again. So, Dubik, having seen both of these perspectives wanting, has tried to discover a bridge that carries on through the actual waging of a war simultaneously to its conduct. As Vietnam and Iraq have shown, the senior echelons of our government need to keep focused on the conduct of the war so that as changes occur within the operational environment, and they always change, They are able to reassess whether the strategic aims, policies, and campaigns need to be adjusted accordingly. The preponderance of the book goes into how leaders can achieve this while harkening back to historical examples of why it is so. Dubik states, "War is a political instrument that uses violence and force to achieve political purposes. By its very nature, therefore, it demands a collaborative political military effort. This would be akin to saying that constructing software or vehicles is an instrument of business, since ultimately the firm needs to make a profit, and therefore there must be a collaborative effort between the engineers that have to design them and everyone else that has to get them into the hands of the customers. Engineers are indeed professionals, as is the military, and there is inherently an issue when those from outside the profession try to dictate how things should be done within it. But just like military operations, an engineering project must meet the aims of the firm. Therefore, a dialogue must occur between both, and not necessarily on equal footing." Dubik posits 5 war-waging principles in 3 friction areas, what he calls tripartite tension, that need to be addressed to ensure that we are carrying forward in war morally and effectively. The 5 war-waging principles. 1. Continuous dialogue. Even though the initial establishment of strategic aims, policies, and campaign goals are debated, rehashed, and accepted, they must also be under constant supervision and reassessment during the conduct of the war. This is in case they need to be changed to support the reality of the operational and political environment. 2. Final decision authority. That, ultimately, the final decision rests with senior political leaders who are responsible for all aspects of national power. 3. Managerial competence. That the bureaucracies that manage all aspects of state and defense departments are effectively supporting aims, or at least bypasses are established to increase timeliness where needed. 4. War legitimacy. That the reasons for going to war are just, and that lives and resources are not risked unnecessarily during the conduct of that war. 5. Resignation. That those in senior positions, be they political or military, if they can't in good moral conscience support a decision after considerable personal deliberation, that they be allowed to resign. The tripartite tensions. 1. Achieving coherence. Ensuring that campaigns waged, in all their aspects, are tailored towards achieving those previously established strategic aims. 2. Generating organizational capacity. The understanding that as strategic aims are established, then subsequently all supporting organizations will have to figure out how to exactly nest their own operations, resources, and missions to achieve the nation's strategic aims. 3. Maintaining legitimacy. That you must be successful, you must follow the conventions of war, and that you must not waste resources and lives unnecessarily. These points are the crux of Dubik's book, what they mean to the nation's leadership, and how they shape the conduct of war, for better or worse. It is easy to see the commonalities in business. We have our own strategic vision and goals for our businesses. We have employees and contractors we use and pay for our desired ends, and we have capital and other resources we expend to achieve those ends. We have a reputation and a brand to uphold, and laws to follow. Failing in any of these can spell doom for our business, just as it does for a nation failing in its conduct of war. For those that are inclined to business, well, we could go over every point Dubik makes in order to develop a list of comparable principles that businesses could adopt. It would be best to read or listen to the words yourself. However, I would like to go over one particular topic that plays an important role in his concept of waging a just war, and one that would be of most concern to developing business plans and projects, and that is of his unequal dialogue. Remember when I mentioned that a dialogue must occur between both senior politicians and military leaders, but not necessarily on an equal footing? I was referring to Dubik's unequal dialogue. It is unequal since objective civilian control of the military requires that civilian leadership have final decision authority when committing military forces to combat. It is a dialogue since no one individual can know everything, and even geniuses make mistakes, so the subject matter experts on military operations need to have a strong voice in the conversation on going into a war, as well as how it is waged. Dubik states, "The reality is that good war-waging decisions are most likely to merge from a set of political and military leaders bluntly and continuously arguing with one another in an attempt to identify strategy, policy, campaign, and organizational solutions to the complex and dynamic problems they face." This is in reference to an important section of Elliot Cohen's book, Supreme Command, entitled On Military Genius, in which organizations can't rely on the capabilities of a few geniuses to be available to make every decision. They have to use the people they got with the knowledge and skills they have. Therefore, working through problems and developing courses of action amongst many subject matter experts is what is needed to generate adequate decisions and shape them. Peter Drucker would agree with this concept. In Drucker's book, Concept of the Corporation, he states, "No institution can possibly survive if it needs geniuses or supermen to manage it. It must be organized in such a way as to be able to get along under leadership composed of average human beings. No institution can endure if it is under one-man rule." The premise for the discussion of Superman in all his writings primarily dealt with the issue of succession of the business after the Superman had left. How would a company survive when it needs geniuses to run it? His solution is simply that the business should develop processes that can be managed by regular people in leadership positions that generated adequate courses of action for the prosperity of the firm under any market condition. Our senior political and military leaders are those average human beings, though subject matter experts in their own right that need to work together. Not to say that we don't elect geniuses into our senior political offices or that military officers don't promote its supermen into its upper echelons, but only that our nation needs a process that doesn't require that to be successful in war. The unequal dialogue is that process, or at least the one that Dubik would believe produces success. There is more to glean from the unequal dialogue, such as the need for a secret, candid, and honest discussion of issues so that every perspective and option is on the table, and how to effectively engage in back-and-forth arguments needed to flesh out into executable courses of action. There are also many other topics not considered in this review that can be utilized by business owners, executives, and their managers in order to make their organizations more effective in moving forward and supervising operations, but we don't want to take any more thunder out of the book. Leaving it at that, James M. Dubik's Just War Reconsidered, Strategy, Ethics, and Theory is a worthwhile read for those in senior positions within a firm, company, business, joint venture, or partnership. You are in a position to guide a major endeavor, or at least manage an important aspect of one, and in doing so, can see some of the same dilemmas that our nation's senior leaders face when going to war and overseeing its conduct. You are ensuring aims are established and worked towards, that the departments or elements of the business are unified in their efforts towards those aims, that you aren't wasting the resources of the organization or wasting the time of your people in fruitless endeavors. The veneer of warfare and business endeavors may look different, but that can be superficial. Fundamentally, waging and conducting a war is in many ways the same as engaging and supervising a business endeavor. You just need to know how to look at it. Just War Reconsidered would be a fine addition to your business waging library. If you'd like to purchase this book, we've provided a link down below in the description. Check it out.